The plan was simple, just a family trip. 1 week in Colorado. I'd rented a cabin near Estes Park, a place with a wraparound porch and just enough distance from the noise of real life. I'd even taken extra days off work. Caitlin and Andrew were going to meet us there once their schedules lined up. It was supposed to be our reset. A break. A celebration of 30 years together. And I destroyed all of it before we even zipped the suitcases. That morning, I was in the basement, looking for the black Samsonite set we always used. It was buried somewhere behind a mountain of junk. You'd think after 3 decades, we'd be better organized, but no, our basement was the same mess of holiday boxes, old baby clothes, broken lamps, and things we kept just in case. I was elbow deep in a pile of random storage bins when I noticed a cardboard box that didn't look familiar. No label, no markings. Just one of those old, soft cardboard boxes with the flimsy lid, the kind offices used for filing. It was shoved back behind a tote full of Christmas lights. I wouldn't have touched it if it didn't have that strange look, like it had been purposely hidden. Inside was a strange collection. Polaroid camera. Dried-out pens. A few mixtapes labeled in black marker. There was a folded concert t-shirt from some 90s band. Beneath it all were journals, 6 or 7 of them. Worn covers. Some spiral-bound, others soft leather. My first instinct was nostalgia. I thought maybe they were Hannah's old writing from college. She'd told me once she used to journal, back when she thought she might study literature. I pulled one out. A small, faded notebook with a sticker peeling off the front and a name written in black Sharpie. Hannah Morgan. Her maiden name. No mistaking it. I hesitated. For a second I almost put it back. I didn't want to snoop. But then I thought, maybe there's something sweet in there. Maybe I'd find a passage about when we met. Maybe I could surprise her by quoting it on our trip. That fantasy lasted exactly 4 pages. At first, it was just entries about college life, roommates, professors, dreams of traveling. But then the tone shifted. She started writing about a guy named Troy. The handwriting got looser, more breathless. There were details, too many details. I felt myself stiffen. I tried to skip past it, telling myself it didn't matter. It was before me. But then came Brian. And Lucas. And Jason. Then Steve. That one stopped me. Steve and his wife still sent us Christmas cards. We'd had them over for barbecues. I coached his kids' soccer team when his back went out. We'd gone camping together, for God's sake. And there he was, immortalized in her journal. The entry was dated August 1996, 2 months after Hannah and I got engaged. I read that page 3 times, trying to convince myself I misunderstood it. But I didn't. Her handwriting was clear. Her language wasn't vague. She'd written about sneaking off after her bachelorette party. How the excitement of being wanted by so many men made her feel more alive than ever. She'd called it her last taste of freedom. Like I was some kind of life sentence. My mouth went dry. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I wanted to stop reading. I should have stopped reading, but I didn't. I went further. Entry after entry. More names. Some I recognized. Others I didn't. I started doing the math, lining up the dates with moments in our life. One of the guys she wrote about had spent Thanksgiving at our house during our first year of marriage. Another had helped us move into our second apartment. I'd shaken hands with these people. I'd laughed with them. The entries didn't just talk about what happened, they celebrated it. She wrote like it was a badge of honor. Words like unapologetic, electric, wild. There was no shame. No guilt. Just a woman chronicling her conquests while planning a wedding with me. And the worst part? I remembered her during that time. She was glowing. Smiling more than usual. I used to think it was because she was excited to marry me. That she was thrilled about our future. But now I couldn't stop wondering, was it because she was having the time of her life behind my back? The longer I read, the more hollow I felt. The room got colder. I sat there on the concrete floor, the edges of the pages smudging from how tightly I was gripping them. The air smelled like mildew and cardboard, but I barely noticed. My hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if I was about to throw up or scream. I flipped back to the first page and saw the year again. 1995. That was the year we moved in together. I remember thinking we were finally settling down. I was working doubles to save for a ring. I thought I was building something solid. Meanwhile, she was documenting flings like they were souvenirs. I don't know how long I stayed down there. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been 2 hours. But at some point, I heard Hannah calling from upstairs. "Garrett? You find the suitcase yet?" Her voice, so normal, so cheerful, it cut me to the bone. I didn't answer. I just stared at the box. At the journals. At the pieces of a life I didn't recognize. The trip was off. That much I knew right away. But more than that, I could feel something inside me splitting. Like a crack forming in the foundation of a house. The kind of crack that spreads no matter how much you try to patch it. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the realization that my marriage, the thing I'd spent nearly 30 years pouring myself into, was built on a version of Hannah that didn't exist. At least not the way I thought she did. And maybe the worst part, the part I'm still wrestling with, is that I never suspected a thing. I walked around for years thinking I had the kind of marriage people envied. We were the couple who made it through everything. Kids, layoffs, illnesses. We were the example. But we weren't. We were a story. And now I was realizing I hadn't written it. I'd just been reading from a script she'd handed me, thinking it was the truth. I closed the journal and placed it back in the box, careful not to wrinkle the pages. Like handling evidence. Because that's what it felt like, evidence of a crime I didn't even know had been committed. I carried the box upstairs with me. The trip to Colorado was over. What came next, I didn't know. But I knew nothing was going to be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. After finding the box, I sat in the garage with the door cracked open, breathing in the cool night air like I was trying to clear out the poison. The box sat on the workbench beside me like it was alive. Every so often, I'd glance at it, half expecting it to vanish, to reveal this was all some twisted misunderstanding. But it didn't vanish. It just sat there. Heavy. Permanent. By morning, I was still in the same spot. I hadn't packed. I hadn't even told Hannah we weren't going to Colorado anymore. She came downstairs in shorts and a sweatshirt, hair in a ponytail, all bright and buzzing about the road trip playlist she made. She kissed the top of my head like everything was normal. Like we were still us. That kiss made my stomach turn. I didn't say a word. I couldn't, not yet. I needed to know more. Needed to be absolutely sure before I set fire to 30 years. My whole body was screaming that something had cracked beyond repair, but my brain needed confirmation. So, while she ran to the store to pick up snacks for the road, I opened the box again. This time, I went deeper. I flipped through every journal, every photo, every note tucked in between the pages. The more I read, the more it felt like peeling back a mask I didn't know she was wearing. I found names I hadn't heard before, Brandon, Chris, even a couple first-name-only entries like she didn't even bother remembering the rest. One of the entries described sneaking out from our apartment while I worked a night shift. She'd written it like it was exciting. He was waiting in his truck, windows fogged up. I couldn't stop shaking. I remember those nights. I was doing inventory at the warehouse, picking up extra hours so we could afford that damn engagement ring she cried over when I gave it to her. She had me working myself into the ground while she was writing love letters to strangers in a diary. I thought that was rock bottom. I really did. Until I found the photos. They were in a smaller envelope, tucked between 2 journals. Loose 4x6 prints. The kind you got developed at the grocery store back in the 90s. I opened the flap and pulled out the stack. And then I just stopped. The first one was a younger Hannah, definitely early 20s. She was on a couch I didn't recognize, wearing nothing but a pair of boxers and a tank top. She was grinning, flipping off the camera. Around her were 5 men. Shirtless. A couple clearly drunk. One was kissing her shoulder while another leaned in from behind, cupping her waist. I knew none of them personally, but one of their faces looked vaguely familiar. I think he helped paint our fence years ago. Maybe a friend of Steve's. Across the bottom, in black marker, someone had scrawled, "Wild Night Number 1." There were more. Another with her in a hotel bed, tangled up with 2 guys, champagne bottles on the nightstand. Another in a car, windows steamed, Her legs stretched across the back seat while a guy I definitely didn't know grinned like he'd just won the lottery. Yep, all these years. Like they meant something. Like he didn't mean anything. At some point I realized I was shaking. My hands couldn't hold still, and my breath was short, shallow, uneven. I had to put the pictures down because I thought I might tear them without meaning to. My vision kept blurring. Whether it was tears or rage or both, I couldn't tell. This wasn't some dumb fling before we met. This wasn't a single mistake. This was a pattern. A whole shadow life she'd never told me about, never hinted at. It ran deep. It overlapped with our early years. She made me believe I was her one and only, that our love story started clean, untarnished. I thought we were solid. Honest. And now I couldn't even look at her without wondering who she really was. When she got home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope open in front of me. She walked in carrying a bag of pretzels and red vines like it was just another day. When she saw what was on the table, she froze. Her eyes locked on the photo on top. The one from the couch. The wild night. She didn't say a word at first. Just stood there in the doorway, blinking. Her face went pale. Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't give her a chance to speak. How long were you planning to keep this hidden? I asked, my voice low. Forever. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked between the photos, the journals, and my face. I wasn't, Garrett, it was a long time ago. That stuff doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter? I said, louder this time. It mattered enough to keep. You hid it. You preserved it. These photos, these pages, this was your real life, wasn't it? Not me. Not the last 30 years. Her voice cracked. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. I pushed back from the table, rising to my feet. My chest felt like it was going to cave in. Then why does it feel like I married a stranger? Why did you lie to me? Let me build a life with you while this sat in our basement like a goddamn time bomb. Tears welled in her eyes. She stepped toward me. I backed away. You lied, Hannah. For decades. You let me think we were. I was young, she snapped. It was before we really settled down. I made mistakes, but they don't define who I am now. No, I said, my voice shaking. But the lies do. And that was the truth of it. Not the sex, not the photos, not even the names. It was the fact that she buried it. Hid it like it never happened. Let me build our whole life on top of that secret. No remorse. No confession. Just silence. Until now. The house felt colder after that conversation. Quieter, too, even though neither of us was saying much anyway. Hannah cried that night. Not in the way I expected, not sobbing into her pillow or chasing after me with apologies. It was this strange, silent grief. She sat on the edge of our bed with her back to me, staring at the wall, tears dripping onto her knees. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. I was still too raw. Too angry. I didn't sleep in our bed. I took the guest room. I couldn't stand the thought of lying next to her, pretending things could still be normal. The space between us was wider than it had ever been. By morning, I'd made a decision. I told her to leave. Not forever, at least not yet. But she couldn't stay here. I needed space, and more than that, I needed truth. The kind that didn't come wrapped in excuses or 15-year-old journals. She packed a bag and left for Nebraska to stay with her mother. I watched her pull out of the driveway like I was watching the closing credits of a movie I didn't remember signing up for. And then I went back inside, sat down at the dining table and opened my laptop. I scanned the diary pages. Not all of them, just the ones that had my gut twisting. The ones with the dates circled in my head. I knew it was going to hurt my kids to see what I'd found, but I also knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to be honest with them. I couldn't protect them from something that big. They deserved the truth, same as I did. Caitlin called me first. She was quiet. Scarily quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could hear her trying not to cry. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling. Dad, I don't understand. Why would she write this down? I didn't have an answer. She asked questions, some I expected, some that caught me off guard. But one stuck with me more than the rest. Did any of this happen, around the time I was conceived? I hadn't wanted to bring it up, not at first. But I could hear the fear in her voice. The hurt. And I had felt it too. That suspicion, creeping in the back of my mind ever since I saw that entry dated almost exactly 9 months before Caitlin's birthday. I told her the truth. I told her there were entries from that time. That I didn't want to believe it either, but the overlap was there. She went quiet again. And then she said the words that broke something in me. Should I get a DNA test? I didn't tell her to do it. I didn't have to. She already knew the answer. And when the results came back, my world, already cracked wide open, collapsed for good. She wasn't mine. Not biologically, anyway. The test was clear. There was no chance I was her father. 0% probability. 30 years of being dad, undone by one lab result. And here's the thing. Caitlin didn't take the news well, but it destroyed me. I remembered holding her for the first time, this tiny pink bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. I remembered staying up with her when she was sick, walking the halls with her in my arms while she cried, teaching her to ride a bike, cheering at every school play, every soccer game, every milestone. I was the one who helped her fill out college applications, who taught her how to parallel park, who cried at her graduation. I was her dad in every way that mattered, except one. And Hannah knew. She had to have known. She let me pour my soul into a life built on a lie. And what's worse, she let Caitlin grow up not knowing the truth. That kind of betrayal, it cuts deeper than anything I ever imagined. It rewrites your identity. Makes you question who you've been all along. I didn't scream. I didn't call Hannah. I didn't even cry. I just sat on the couch for what felt like hours, holding the printed result in my hands, staring at the numbers like they might change if I blinked hard enough. Andrew didn't take it well either. He called me that night, furious. Not at me, at her. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He kept asking why she would lie. Why she would do that to me. To us. And then he said something I didn't expect. I don't want to talk to her. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That was the first time I realized I wasn't the only one she betrayed. She'd lost more than just a husband. She was losing her children too. The next few days were a blur. I didn't eat much. I didn't sleep. Every room in the house felt tainted. Every photo on the wall, every memento we'd collected over the years, it all felt like a museum exhibit for a life that didn't exist anymore. I started wondering if Caitlin even wanted to talk to me. What if she didn't see me the same way? What if that connection we had, father and daughter, was now just a complicated footnote? But then she called me. Not to ask questions. Not to cry. She just said, "I love you, Dad." Nothing changes that. And I broke down. Not because I was weak, but because I had been holding everything inside for too long. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Hannah and I would speak again. I didn't know if I could ever fully heal from what I'd learned. But in that moment, hearing Caitlin say those words, I knew one thing. Whatever Hannah had done, whatever truth had been buried, I had been the father. Every single day of her life. That was real. That mattered. Even if everything else didn't. I didn't plan on telling anyone outside the family. At first, I thought I could keep it contained. Me, Hannah, the kids. Let the truth stay in our circle, where the damage could be managed. But the thing about small towns is, nothing stays secret for long. And I wasn't exactly subtle about Hannah's sudden absence. People started asking questions. At the post office, in line at the bank. Even at the diner where I got coffee every other morning. Everything okay? Where's Hannah? Still going to Colorado? Their voices were casual, friendly. Just small talk. But each one felt like sandpaper on an open wound. I didn't give details at first. I'd just say something vague, change of plans, or, she's staying with her mom. But the silence didn't last long. Somebody must have seen the moving boxes. Or maybe one of Caitlin's friends heard something. Either way, the whispers started before I could get ahead of it. By the end of the week, the tone had shifted. People weren't asking anymore. They were looking. Watching me a little longer than normal. Hesitating when they spoke. I caught a woman from our church talking to another woman near the frozen foods aisle. Their conversation stopped the moment I turned the corner. I didn't need to hear what they were saying. I already knew. I hadn't even left the house that day planning to feel like a sideshow, but that's exactly what I became. The guy whose wife cheated. The guy who raised someone else's kid. The guy who didn't know. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me, but it did. Of course it did. I've lived in this town for over 20 years. Helped neighbors build fences. Donated to every school fundraiser. Volunteered with the Rotary Club. I wasn't a stranger to these people. And yet now I felt completely alone. Meanwhile, Hannah was still holed up in Nebraska, staying with her mother. I hadn't spoken to her since the DNA test came back. I didn't feel the need to. What was left to say? From what I heard, she was struggling. Her mother was supportive at first, one of those fiercely loyal types who defended her daughter no matter what. But apparently even that started to crack. Word was, the story had started to circulate even there. Some extended family caught wind of it. A cousin maybe. Someone talked. Someone always talks. Caitlin stopped responding to her completely. Not even a seen notification on her texts. Andrew blocked her altogether. I think it scared her more than anything, that her kids could disappear from her life so quickly. Like it finally sank in how deep her betrayal had gone. I won't pretend I didn't feel a small, bitter satisfaction when I heard that. Hannah had always carried herself like someone in control. She knew the right things to say. She knew how to spin a story. But now, she couldn't talk her way out of this. The people around her didn't want to hear excuses. They wanted answers. And she didn't have any that could make this go away. One day, I got a text from her. Just one line. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, not sure if I wanted to block the number or type out everything I'd been holding in. In the end, I just locked the phone and tossed it on the counter. Let her sit in the silence for once. What I didn't expect, though, was how lonely it all felt. I thought anger would protect me. I thought the truth would be enough. But truth without closure, it's like carrying a weight that never shifts. I wasn't mourning the woman she was. I was mourning the version of her I had created in my mind. The one I'd shared a home with, raised children with, built dreams around. Turns out, that version never existed. And that's a special kind of grief. It doesn't come with sympathy cards or casseroles. It just lingers, quiet, bitter, patient. I started spending more time out of the house. I'd drive around aimlessly, park near the lake, sit on the tailgate of my truck and just exist. I didn't know what else to do. Some days I thought about selling the house. Other days I thought about torching it. Mostly, I just waited for the numbness to go away. It didn't. But eventually, the weight started to settle differently. I still felt it, sure, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. It was just there. A part of me now. Something I'd carry, like an old injury that aches when it rains. A couple weeks later, I saw her name pop up on my phone again. This time it wasn't a text, it was a voicemail. "Garrett, I know you hate me. I probably deserve that. I don't even know if you'll listen to this whole thing. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for not telling you sooner. For letting you live your life without the whole truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to disappear without saying something." I deleted it without listening to the end. She'd had 30 years to say something. One voicemail wasn't going to fix what she broke. I didn't set out to start a new life. At least, not right away. At first, I was just trying to escape the wreckage. The house felt haunted. Not with ghosts, but with reminders. Her coffee mug. The stack of photo albums in the hallway closet. The towel she always left on the bathroom door. I couldn't breathe in that house without tasting the lie. So I left. Packed up what mattered and rented a small place in South Carolina, near the coast. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere where nobody knew me as that guy. I told the kids I needed time and space, and they understood. Caitlin cried when I hugged her goodbye. Andrew helped me load the truck. Neither of them said it out loud, but I think they both knew I wasn't coming back. I didn't say goodbye to Hannah. She'd already gotten the message. For a while, I didn't talk to anyone. I'd go days without saying a single word to another human. I'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the tide roll in and out like it was trying to tell me something. I wasn't lonely, exactly. I was hollow. But sometimes hollow is easier than heartbroken. And then I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. Her name was Cheryl. She was the ex-wife of Jason. Jason, one of the names in Hannah's journal. I barely remembered him, but I remembered his smirk in the photo, remembered the careless way he'd thrown his arm around my wife like she was something he owned. Cheryl knew all about it. She'd known back then too. Apparently, she'd found her own set of photos tucked in Jason's drawer years ago. She divorced him soon after. Took her kids, moved 3 states away. I heard what happened, she said. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I know what it feels like. We started talking more after that. Casual at first. Long phone calls. Sharing old wounds and laughing at how blind we'd both been. 2 people connected not by love, but by the same kind of pain. She came down to visit a few weeks later. We didn't rush anything. We weren't even sure what this was. But there was comfort in the way she understood my silences. She didn't try to fix me. I didn't try to impress her. We just existed, side by side, with the kind of ease that comes from surviving something brutal. When word reached Hannah that Cheryl and I had grown close, I got one final message. No greeting. No apology. So this is how it ends. With her. I didn't answer. Because yes, this was how it ended. Not with a fight. Not with some dramatic confrontation. But with a quiet shift. A realignment of 2 people who'd had everything and lost it to a truth buried in the basement. She didn't get to write the ending. I did. She tried one last time, drove back to the house while it was empty, hoping for a moment to plead her case. I heard about it from the neighbor. Said she stood on the porch for a long time, looking around like she was trying to see the life that used to be there. Then she left. That was the last time anyone saw her in town. As for me, I'm still here. Still figuring it out. Cheryl and I take walks in the evening, sometimes sit on the dock and say nothing at all. It's not romance, not exactly. But it's peace. And after what I've been through, peace feels like a miracle. Caitlin and I are close again. Tighter than before in some strange way. Biology be damned, I'll always be her father. And she knows it. She told me the other night, if I could go back and choose, I'd still want you. That meant more than she'll ever know. I don't think Hannah will ever understand what she really destroyed. It wasn't just a marriage. It was the trust. The stability. The idea that we were safe with each other. She lit a match and burned it all down, and when the smoke cleared, she expected there to still be something left to salvage. But there wasn't. She gambled on me never finding out. And she lost. Now I carry the truth like a scar. Visible only to me. A reminder that love, once broken in certain ways, can't be stitched back together. Not without always feeling where it tore. Still, I'm alive. I'm healing. I'm learning how to live again, one quiet day at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I'm okay.